Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Greetings, feely humans. My name's Known Wells, and welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Today on episode 38, I talk with my friend Tony the therapist for another iteration of Tony Time on the power of feeling safe. We talk about trauma teddy bears. Tony hugs and snuggles my teddy bear from childhood, Barnabas. And we talk about why trust is a huge part of healing. This episode is a follow-up to episode 37, where I chatted with my friend Haley Nicole. And we explored her rape experience and the meditative healing experience and her PTSD and anxiety and panic attacks. So if you haven't listened to that episode, it's quite tough in parts. There's a trigger warning there, but please do listen to it. It's very powerful, and Haley is amazing. So this episode, though, is a follow-up, episode 38. Again, on the power of feeling safe. I'm wondering if what safe means to you in your mental health. Also, do you have a tangible object in your life that centers you? Something that calms you and comforts you? Let me know. Let me know on Instagram at YouMeEmpathy, or in the show notes, just comment on youmeempathy.com. So, without further ado, please enjoy this episode 38, with Tony the therapist on the power of feeling safe. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our neuroses, our mental illnesses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being human. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today I am here with Tony for a long-awaited Tony time. The listeners have been demanding more Tony in their lives, and They got it today.
Wow.
I know.
That's so exciting.
The internet waves are flush with demands for Tony time.
Wow. Well, thank you guys. I mean, that's really
he's blushing, you guys.
Yeah, the three of you that made that heard, I just appreciate that. So that's really those three emails that Known received in joke and jest. Are you sure they weren't sarcastically requesting?
I read them really quickly.
Did you?
Just in case they were sarcastic,
okay.
And I skipped over the PSs that were more criticisms than praises.
That.
So yeah,
that 3 to 100 ratio.
Yeah. Well, we are here today to do a Tony time, and for the listeners, if you aren't aware, Tony is my friend, but he's also a psychotherapist, and he comes on the show every once in a while to give the show a little credibility, something that doesn't come from me, because I am just a silly, feely boy, and Tony is a professional. But he has a disclaimer that is important, and here it is.
Hi, folks. Here's my important disclaimer. that I think is important to my board. So, but my name is Anthony Romaike, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California, licensed by the Board of Behavioral Sciences. And my license number is LMFT. Let's see if I can get that out. LMFT 47805. And just maybe a quick little bio. I'm in private practice as a marriage family therapist, and currently in the city of Tustin, but shortly moving to the city of Newport Beach. And I guess by the time this airs, I will have moved and I'll be in the city of Newport Beach. And I'm in private practice. I'm also a certified sex addiction therapist. And so I see clients who present with hypersexual, compulsive-based sexual behaviors who are looking to change that, in addition to just all the other work that comes with being a marriage and family therapist that impact our capacities to have healthy, satisfying relationships.
Beautiful. I love it.
Cool.
I love all of
too.
that.
Well, I do too. As I say, I'm the luckiest man in the world. I seriously get to do the coolest job. So,
no, I'm glad. It shows.
Well,
it
thank
shows.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we're here today in episode 38 to talk about, this is a follow-up to episode 37 with my friend Haley Nicole, and it's just a follow-up to her story. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please be sure to go back and do that. It is a wonderful episode. Haley is a remarkable woman and someone who experienced some trauma and has found her way through it through therapy, through other forms, travel, those types of things, and it's a pretty remarkable story. So go listen to that. But before we get into kind of the trauma stuff, I was curious to hear from you, Tony. Tony is, you can't see this, but I have to take a picture of this. I don't have my phone on me. He's snuggling a teddy bear at the moment.
I saw this here, and I guess for the listeners who aren't aware, you'll be moving, and so everything is in a state of packing or unpacked or not yet packed.
Yeah.
And there happens to be this wonderful teddy bear sitting next to me, and as we were talking about this subject specifically, this reminded me of what could be like a trauma bear, like,
Okay, yeah.
Somebody
that was my trauma bear growing up.
Was this?
His name's Barnabas. He's missing an eye, and I'm definitely going to have to take a picture of you and Barnabas before we go, so the listeners have some context. That bear I've had since I was a kid.
Did you really?
Yep.
How old do you think?
5, 6.
Wow.
Yeah, around there. Yeah, it's an oldie.
This is
it's
really
30
cool.
plus years old.
And surprisingly in really good shape.
Yeah, I've kept it in good shape.
Minus the eyeball.
It's all right.
But,
Yeah.
So this is cool. Literally, a lot of times if I work with clients in trauma, one of the things I find so helpful is if they can find some kind of soothing object, whether it's something that's, to the senses, just a tactile softness and comforting. And I've had clients, get blankets, like a very soft, nurturing, comforting blanket or stuffed animals. So that's kind of
the material does matter.
The material does matter. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think if we're talking about trauma specifically, and you think about, just the impact of that, and then I don't know why is it that something then, sensory or tactile is, the softness or the material becomes such an important, comforting issue, I guess. So it becomes important, to be soft and comforting.
Well, speak toward the mic. And
yes. Sorry. I am
not
speaking
the bear.
to Barnabas.
We'll have to get a picture of you.
Yes, we will get a picture of Barnabas myself.
What is there another facet of that? Now you've sort of ventured into this other territory that I'm very curious about. Is there? there has to be a component of like this object means something to me, or is that a component of it as well? Not just the sort of sensory, tactile part of it.
Well, I think so. I think what it potentially could become for somebody is, and what I like it to be for my clients, if they're needing something like this, if they need this comforting object, is one, something that they can take with them into therapy. Therefore, it's something they can take out with them from therapy. So, meaning it's a kind of reminder throughout the week.
Oh yeah,
of
like a totem.
It's like a totem. Yeah, exactly. And it's something that they can keep with them throughout the week. And we'll talk about, if there were a particular time of distress maybe that they were feeling during the week, and if they went and got their object, and it could be something that ultimately becomes, again, just very soothing and comforting and centering, as maybe a very distressing thought may have, come into their awareness, or maybe they're just feeling very down, and maybe just a very difficult day, low mood, and maybe just a negative impact to sense of self.
Yeah.
And it's something again, it's just something they can tangibly grab, right? It's something that is a tangible representation, I think, of healing, a tangible representation of the therapeutic process, and hopefully the safety and the comfort that they feel when they're in. So I like them to bring it to therapy, and that way it really exists in both worlds.
Yeah.
And so it's really something that they can carry with them. Sometimes people refer to it as a transitional object. Therapists at times will do this near the end of therapy. Also, that it's a transitional object between, the safety and the comfort and the growth of therapy to, maybe a break that they're taking and moving on for some time, or, I think there's a lot of value. I
love
really
that.
think there's kind of a lot of really cool value to something like this.
I'd love to hear from you listeners if there is something that you have in your life, a transitional object, or a object of that safety and centering and grounding and comfort that helps you when you struggle in times of struggle or stress. I'd love to hear what that is. That would be, I'm curious about that. I would love to know, and maybe get some ideas for myself.
Yeah, and just I don't know. I mean, I would certainly, I don't know what and how much you want to put out or be vulnerable with this, but since Barnabas is here with us, he's kind of sitting up at the table with us here.
He can't talk though, Tony.
He can't talk. He's not like Ted.
He's definitely not like Ted. He's a sweet boy.
So we're still going to smoke that weed, right?
How dare you? How dare you pervert my childhood innocence
with Seth MacFarlane?
Oh God.
And Ted. But yeah, I mean, I'm also just curious, and I'm wondering about the listeners, just, your personal, I don't know what Barnabas meant for you, and as you went through your life and healing. And
yeah, I wish I could say that he was like an object that I remembered being like in specific moments where I remember him being a comfort. But I don't have memories like that. Yeah. I don't have those memories, and I maybe I'll access them at some point. Sure. But I do just know, generally speaking, he was someone was a comfort, and someone who slept with me, in the bed, in the bunk bed when I was younger, and I don't think it was I don't think Barnabas I took with me places, but I could be wrong. Yeah. I don't remember. I should ask my mom about that, but
and sometimes it's just something we have in the house that necessarily doesn't go with us or travel with us, but just something permanent, and consistent.
I have this rock here. It's like an emerald colored rock, and it's very soft and cool to the touch.
Oh yeah.
And I sometimes hold it when I'm recording with guests.
Oh wow.
And I don't know, there's something about it. It's like the feel of it that calms me a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, our listeners can't see it, but it's just beautiful colored. Yeah. So interesting. So maybe that's some centering for you and comfort. Yeah. Part of the outdoors, nature based.
Totally. That's definitely part of it.
Which has always been pretty foundational for you anyway. I mean, in terms of
Definitely. So let's get into Haley's story a little bit. One of the first things that came to mind about her story is her love of sort of adventure. Yeah. And it started in like a pretty dramatic way. Right. Basically, she lost someone in her life, and it sort of triggered this, like, I need to make a change. I need to do something dramatic. And I'm wondering to you, Tony, do you find that a lot? Like when we experience when someone in our lives dies or something, you hear about this, like, I need to start living, right? I need, like, you hear about this shift in perspective. Right. Do you get that a lot?
I think so. Yeah, I think fairly often. I think that's a fairly normal, human response.
Yeah.
to that because, like you said already, perspective, it usually gives us such a different perspective, and, certainly the recognition and awareness that, life is short, right? And that things can very quickly be taken away from us, and life as we know it can very quickly be altered and changed for, very significant ways. And so I think so. I mean, I think what people then tend to walk away from those particular experiences really is a sense of awareness, and maybe that does lead to adventure of some sort. Or, I think for people, just even reinventing themselves to, at some level, I think in terms of recognizing, wait a minute, is this all there is? Or am I doing everything that I want to be doing? What is it, again, life's short. And so what is it maybe that I really want to do? And I think maybe it even speaks inherently to, maybe a very primitive part of ourselves, that seek healing, right? In travel. I think Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush.
Yeah, sure.
He wrote a book called Ghost Rider, and it was a pretty phenomenal book, basically about his, adventures, so to speak, and just travels after he had lost both his wife and his daughter, I think both within a 2-year period. Mm. And, it just completely shook his foundation. I mean, obviously something like that would. And it becomes about his travels. I mean, throughout South, Central, and Northern America as he literally got on his motorcycle. And I can't remember the mileage. I mean, it was just something insane that he did for, over, I think, year's time. And just, again, the book's an amazing exploration of what the healing process for him and his travels and why he needed that, the necessity of that life for him afterwards. So, yeah, it's amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a strong part of people's experience.
What about specifically making that decision allows us to find some more self-awareness and kind of look inward? Like what, and in what ways? Because here's an example. Sure. Like when I I'm losing my train of thought. God damn it.
If we had commercials, I could insert one here. Do we have a sponsor? Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank our sponsor.
I guess what I'm just saying is why does that happen to us? Like what about the travel experience or the big moved experience, like the getting out of like a routine, what about that shift really heals us? Like what about that? Because it, as you said, with Neil Peart and with Haley and and for me, like travel is a huge healer. Like what about that specifically that like really can be, like from your perspective, that really can be good for mental health?
Gosh, that's, I mean, such a great and big question. So, I can't even start, I think, to tackle what everybody's unique, need or desire to do that would be, because, I think it's such a personal journey. In general, though, some of the thoughts that just popped into my head as I was thinking about that question, it's some of which, maybe all of which are healthy. Part of me at first says, part of it can just certainly serve to be a distraction.
Sure.
So part of it might just be a necessary distraction, which I would say if we remain in a state of long-term distraction, that could potentially lead to some psychopathology, meaning if we're not integrating the trauma and we're just continuing to distract and not processing the hurt and the wounding, I think ultimately there could be some psychopathology that develops as a result of not getting that kind of integration and ultimately some healing around what it is we may be avoiding or distracting from. Having said that, though, I think at the same time, I think we have, obviously we have inherent defense mechanisms. And I think a lot of times we will initially experience some necessary distractions or what we call disassociation and disconnection. And I think part of that just allows us to survive whatever impact, the trauma has overwhelmed us with. And ultimately that's what dissociation serves to do, is give us some space between what might overwhelm us and basically our mental capacities to manage and, not overtake us mentally. So, I think initially some of that can be a part of that experience, that I just have to get away. Right.
And a positive one.
And could potentially be very positive. And I think over time, what you find is slowly, and everybody's different obviously at this, but, whatever the pace the person may need in terms of being able to integrate the awareness of the hurt and the trauma and slowly be able to adapt and adjust to this new life, right? I mean, because, I feel like a lot of times when trauma happens to us, we're not the same person. I mean, we're never going to be the same person again. And I think we have to then grow into a new person, which ultimately I think can be a very great thing and a healthy thing in terms of how we grow and the necessity of growing. There's a great book actually on this. I think it may have come out in the mid 80s.
Don't tell me it's The Body Keeps the Score.
It's a wonderful book by Bessel van der Kolk. I'm not sure our listeners have ever, that's a joke because we talk about him every podcast, I believe. Actually, it's a book called Necessary Losses, and the author is Judith Viurst. And I remember reading this, I think in the late 80s, early 90s maybe. It was recommended to me.
Tony's old, you guys.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm got a lot of grays in the beard here right now. But it's a phenomenal book, Necessary Losses, and it really speaks to this, that, loss is an inevitable part of life. And it's how we work through that process, that ultimately is really important. So, but again, getting back to this idea of, maybe early need for avoidance, disconnection, and slowly being able to integrate what happened to us, I think can be a part of this process. And, sometimes I think it's something very grounding about adventure and exploration, and something I think in terms of life perspective, I don't know, getting outside of ourselves and seeing something that is so much greater than us, I think is
Yeah. That's a big part of it for me is it's humbling. It's a very humbling experience, and it allows you to, get outside yourself and forget about your own bullshit and recognize that there's other modes of living, other, cultures that are maybe doing it in different ways and maybe better ways, and maybe better ways can bring value,
Absolutely. Well, and I don't know why traditionally I think about this when I think about, doing an adventure or an exploration, but so much of that seems to be tied to like the natural geography of the landscapes around us. And I think that, whether we go and, see the Grand Canyon, or we go to Yosemite, or, we go to some of these, areas in which, again, is so perspective changing, because I think when we look at something so grand and we think again that, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and, the Colorado River is going to continue to flow and carve out.
The sun will come out.
There you go.
Tomorrow, bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun.
He just looks for reasons to sing, folks. He just looks for reasons.
Tomorrow, throw away the cobwebs and the sorrow, till there's none.
Wow.
Tomorrow. Okay, wow. I'll stop. I'm so sorry.
Barnabas and even turned and looked at you on that
one. I need to ask you this. What happens when someone experiences that trauma and then almost like there's like a refusal or a steadfastness in not wanting to change, like not wanting to be changed by that trauma? Do you see that?
Yeah, and I thought of denial, as a defense mechanism in the way you describe that. And I think a lot of times if we're stuck in denial, there's a high possibility that whatever happened to us, it's just too much, it's just too much to take in.
Yeah.
And so, and that's, the stuckness that we talk about when we think of potential psychopathology, or the development of, and by that, I mean an anxiety disorder, or a depressive mood disorder, or, potentially even something more severe. And I think it really speaks to the capacity that we have within us to, integrate what happened to us. And that varies for everybody. I think that varies upon how much trauma we've already gone through in our lives. I think that depends upon how much resources that we have around us, financial, spiritual, emotional, and do we have those? And I think it's a lot harder for us to integrate maybe trauma if we don't have those things around us, if we don't have loving, caring, supportive people around, or we don't have the financial resources for, psychotherapy or other forms of assistance, then, I think, there can be some pretty significant stuckness. And I think a lot of times that's what we talk about when we talk about complex trauma, or we talk about complex grief and bereavement, is that, the person is really struggling to be able to integrate the trauma that occurred. You can see this sometimes if there's been profound, significant early trauma, and even what we consider today is, dissociative disorders, and this has taken the place of what we used to call multiple personality disorder. Dissociative identity disorder is the term that we use now to describe basically what ultimately becomes very significant internal splitting of personality and ego structure. And so ultimately what you get is a divided self, a very divided and compartmentalized self into multiple, various variations of personality. And, part of that again is because there has been such overwhelming and profound trauma that it basically overwhelmed the person's ability to integrate what had happened. And you get these split off versions of self for survival. Once again, it always goes back to the brain's amazing way to survive, and this just happened to be the profound way that this person found to survive. And, and basically try and continue to live through what was so profound.
So when we talk about Haley, so she experienced a trauma and did what a lot of us do, and she took a trip, and then that was taken away from her in a very tragic way, and she was
horrific,
sexually assaulted. Did you pick up on anything about that particular experience that you want to speak to as a psychotherapist, or that just stood out to you? Part of her story.
Well, I think, when I think of, when I think of something like that, which again, so horrific. Just so horrific.
The worst possible thing.
Gosh, so painful and just, it physically hurts when you think of, or hear these, horrific type of experiences. And I guess what I thought of when things like that, and not to Haley specific, again, since I don't treat her or anything, but just the thought that came to mind when I think about these types of experiences is a broken trust. I feel like that occurs, meaning a foundational breach of trust in life and humans, And one of the things that I find in healing specifically, and people's need to be able to heal, is safety and trust. And, we were talking about, Barnabas, the teddy bear here earlier, but just, again, talking about that person or that object, that thing that is consistently there, that person that offers consistent, care, soothing. And when I hear about these horrific, and any, obvious, sexual, violation, betrayal. I think the thing that gets broken down is the ability to trust.
Yeah.
Just to know that we could be, perpetrated against, violated, and that broken trust in humanity, that broken trust in relationships, that just the mistrust now that has to be a part of our existence, or a hypervigilance, and what does that do to healing?
Yeah,
and the way in which that breaks down the ability to heal, and the way that breaks down the ability to trust, and relationships being so paramount to healing. And the ability to feel that we can trust another human being, to feel like we can be comforted by another human being. And I think people that have experienced sexual assaults, betrayal, violations, one of the things that is taken away is an inherent sense in being able to trust other people.
Yeah.
And again, we're connective beings that desire intimacy, and we desire closeness, and we desire, and so, trust is paramount and safety is paramount to healing. And so what happens if that's been taken away from you? Your inherent ability to trust another human being. So it's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an absolute horrible thing because, again, I think it robs people of that inherent ability, in a sense, to get healing. Because,
Right.
How do you trust another human being?
Well, and then it makes sense that she, I mean, in addition to this horrific thing that happens, then she experiences this reaction from a section of people who essentially just wrote her off as like being a dumb, drunk American,
right?
Which is a thing that happens, especially with women. And it's not only inhumane, it's sexist, and it's just so disgusting. My heart goes out to Haley for that. But I was going to get to, it makes sense that the trust you're talking about that was betrayed, that was broken, and then she's like, she basically admitted to me, like, I probably shouldn't have done it, but I went on a solo motorcycle ride through, I think, like Indonesia or something.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Wanting to be isolated.
People aren't safe, right?
Yeah.
Right.
People aren't safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, again, not uncommon for people to then want to just isolate and find healing on their own, right?
Yeah.
To just leave and to go and I'll be alone, and I'll just be me, myself, and I, and that's who I'll trust. And long term, I think people who have experienced this, if people carry through with the rest of their life and ultimately end up believing that there isn't safety in people, right? There isn't trust, and trust is not to be had, and you have to hold up some hypervigilance and close yourself off to people. Sadly, I think this can lead to, again, it doesn't mean it will, but I mean, it can, lead to the psychopathology that we were talking about, but mostly just disconnection from people, right? Which ultimately becomes so sad for the person. I mean, and others who may want to be in relationship with these individuals, because it's just, it's so difficult for them, again, to be able to trust other people. And gosh, I mean, at the end of the day, just relationships can be so wonderful. And if we have to be hyper vigilant and defended against being connected and being intimate, I mean, it's just ultimately really potentially a very sad way to go through life.
I mean, relationships and connecting are, in my estimation, the thing that makes this world so amazing, you know, because through those connections, we look inward, we grow, we connect, all that stuff. Absolutely. In Haley's case, like I was grateful to know that she had, some people in her life, a friend, her, future husband, boyfriend at the time, a few people in her life that she could talk to about this, and she did trust, which was great.
Right. Absolutely.
How does someone go from, because there has to be cases where someone, they basically lose trust from everyone.
Absolutely. How
do you get back from that?
Gosh, I know, right? I mean, that's just, that's almost more of a statement than a question.
Right.
I think you just made.
Because it's so big and there's so much, so much going on.
And it's so hard, and it's so difficult. And I think, if the person does maybe pursue psychotherapy as a part of that, I think it can be a very slow process as the person very slowly over time maybe learns to let the therapist in. Yeah. And very slowly learns that that's a relationship in which they can very slowly start to rebuild trust. And yet, even in those circumstances, and understandably so, the work can be very slow, and the work can be, there can be a lot of breaks in the therapeutic, and rifts within the therapeutic relationship, because at that point, a lot of things from the client can be perceived as another potential, breach of trust or a breakdown in the relationship. And so, there really does require a lot of, obviously, compassion, and there, and very, certainly a lot of patience. I mean, which is generally a normal part of the process anyway. But But again, if the person can, stick with the process, hopefully over time that can very slowly be rebuilt. And hopefully the person can start to internalize a sense of safety again and a sense of trust. And then, start to take that outside of the psychotherapeutic relationship into other trusting, safe relationships. And, but gosh, yeah, my heart goes out to that process. It's a really difficult process.
Yeah,
for sure.
So Haley herself, I was excited to hear. She had a great experience after this awful experience,
Right.
a great experience in therapy,
Right.
herself, which is great. And then she found a therapist and was diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
And was having panic attacks, and to help her process through those or combat those, her therapist advised her to weave. So she started weaving as a way to keep those at bay, or just kind of work through it.
Right.
Tell me about like an activity like that can help through trauma.
Yeah, and that's such a great one. One that I've thought of here recently because again, I know somebody who's participating in this right now, which is sewing.
Sewing, yeah.
And this particular person is getting a lot of benefit out of this sewing project that they've recently. It's a blanket, actually. It's like a quilted blanket or patchwork.
That works perfect.
Yeah, it's like
to go back to our transitional object.
Absolutely. So the person is actually involved in sewing this patchwork blanket. And it's really awesome because, one of the things I think that is so benefiting from something like that is the mindfulness, that comes with that.
Totally.
And the focus required, whether it's in weaving or in sewing.
It's hard work.
It's hard work. It's repetitive.
You have to
high level of concentration and focus.
Your brain can't be moving a mile a minute.
Brain
has to focus on that one thing.
I think that's the benefit. You have to be in the moment, and it forces you to be in the moment. And with trauma, the brain wants to be hypervigilant. The brain wants to be, always seeking danger and how it's going to maneuver around danger. So you have this component of hypervigilance. Hence, you'll get panic attacks as a result of, that part of the brain just being on hyper alert, and which is good. But obviously with somebody with PTSD, it just never shuts down. It's just on constant alert. And so getting to weave or getting to sew and getting to just sit down and be in the moment, be mindful and hyper-focused is such a wonderful, I think, escape from this, just mind that wants to be on 24/7 and in hyper-alert. And and in this case, this person is literally sewing together what will be their own transitional safety object.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, it's just such a awesome exercise. So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there an aspect of, maybe this is me projecting or fishing a little bit, but
Sure.
Is there an aspect of people who have dealt with trauma who, at a certain point in their recovery or therapy or just processing that trauma, have a strong desire to want people to understand that trauma and what they went through? Do you ever get that?
Oh, interesting question. Oh, gosh, let me think for a second if that's something that I see and if that's something that tends to come. Not necessarily. Really, as I'm reflecting, I might be wrong, but as I'm just kind of thinking through, nothing is standing out in terms of that as a particular dynamic, maybe that I've seen clinically. I think, and I mean, maybe some of that is being had in the psychotherapeutic experience, and maybe that's why I'm not thinking about it in terms of other ways in which that is being sought out.
I guess maybe where I'm coming from is probably just my own journey.
Well, what are you thinking? Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking talking about this stuff and wanting really people to understand the trauma I experienced and where I came from in terms of, my eating disorder and the childhood trauma. Like, I want people to understand those things because I first want them to maybe potentially relate or
Sure.
find some healing themselves.
Yeah.
I guess that's the motive, and that's the whole motive of this podcast is I want to be vulnerable, therefore to potentially provide healing experiences for others.
Right.
I'm sure that's not just me. There's many listeners of this podcast who are that way too, but that's eventually the point that I came to in my own journey is once I was comfortable with it,
right.
I wanted people to know.
Yeah.
I wanted people to know for all those reasons.
Yeah, and maybe I'm hearing you a little differently now, because I think one of the things maybe that you're expressing, and to which I have seen, which is I think once somebody has gone through something that for so long was kept secret, and it was something that they felt like they weren't able to share with other people, or maybe they weren't actually able to share with other people, that I feel like once it's out, and there's maybe been enough integration or healing that they're able to talk about it and they're able to share about it. And maybe they're able, maybe they've even gone through, a significant healing process. And as such, what I have found quite often is that people do become very motivated about educating or helping others, in similar ways. And I think part of that is usually as a result of recognizing what it was they felt and what they were going through, and just the darkness, I feel like that was a part of their life for so long. And then the healing and the transformation and the lightness that they now feel, I think part of that is so exciting for them and so positively motivating, knowing that life can be so different and look so different and experience so differently, that a lot of times I've seen people then want to help others, in a lot of different ways, some of which is mentoring, some of which is maybe creating programs of something of the topic that they've worked through, podcast formats, writing, whether that's, somebody's wanting to put together a blog or a book or an article. But, a lot of times I just think there's such genuine excitement about the healing and the transformation that they've experienced. They just want to be able to share that with others.
Well, and being an advocate in and of itself is part of their healing journey too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool because I think it's just such a, genuine, authentic outpouring of their heart.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's out of not, again, some rigid duty or obligation. It's just a organic, effusive display of their heart, because of what they've experienced. Yeah. And to me, that's amazing. I mean, to see somebody, transform from just such a dark place to then wanting to share their own personal healing and transformation to help others. And it's just, that is nothing more exciting than that.
Totally. Yeah. Well, let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say. I guess I just will say to you listeners, thanks for listening. Definitely, if you haven't checked out Haley's episode, go back to episode 37 and listen to that. And make sure to give Haley a follow on Instagram. All the links are there in the show notes for that episode, and I'll add them here for the show notes for this episode. I appreciate you guys. I really do, and I love all the interactions I get on Instagram and Twitter and the Facebook group. So keep that up. It makes my day, and be sure to leave a rating and review for You Me Empathy in iTunes. It helps out the show, and it's free. It's a free thing to do. You can help out the show. That would be fantastic. And I will be sure to share, I'll share it before, the picture of Tony with Barnabas.
Oh, Barnabas.
But I will thank Tony for being here for another episode of Tony Time.
Absolutely. Always such a pleasure. Love these Tony Times.
Me too, buddy. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.